So JD Vance is a source of a lot of affection and appreciation for a lot of people in the Republican Party, at least. Um, but he's also a source of great controversy, and we've heard that on this platform. Some people think he's too dovish, and some people think he's too anti-Europe. So he tweeted this morning, and this is consistent with his normal Twitter game, which is he's very aggressive and writes things that you can't believe the Vice President of the United States is writing. This morning, Josh Krashour, who's a very experienced reporter who now is at the Jewish Insider, says wrote a hit piece against me in the Jewish Insider, which has become an anti-JD rag. I love the fact that he refers to himself by his initials. It has many problems, including 7 anonymous quotes from cowardly Republicans. But the most glaring factual error is the below. So he just points out that there's a factual error in the story. So, Bacha, you first. How would you characterize? Okay, so here's a quote from the piece. Well, no, actually, that's all right. This quote doesn't really go to the heart of what he was upset about. But how would you characterize J.D. Vance's posture towards Israel specifically and more generally in foreign policy? Like, what school of foreign policy do you think he's from?
I think he is very dovish. It's my understanding of him that he is very pro-Israel. He wrote a white paper about why support for Israel and support for Ukraine are not actually comparable at all. Kind of like the argument I was making, like that it's a very populist, America first thing to be pro-Israel, whereas Ukraine does not really fall into that category. To me, until this happened, I would have said he's exactly like President Trump. He's not an isolationist. President Trump is not an isolationist at all. There are a lot of conflicts he's willing to engage in, but the view that Marco Rubio laid out for the Trump 2.0 foreign policy is that every single encounter, every single foreign policy decision will be determined based on 3 questions. Does it make America stronger? Does it make America safer? Does it make America more prosperous? So that's like neither isolationist nor not. It says we want peace through strength, and we're not going to be like worried about pursuing it. What stood out to me in this whole episode vis-a-vis JD Vance was not the dovishness. It was what seems to me like a kind of cowardly undermining of President Trump's decision in this group chat. And then when he was invited by Hegseth to go back to President Trump and raise his questions with Trump, he declined and then sort of, backed off. And that was the thing that stood out to me. And honestly, Mark, Dan brought this up the first time you all discussed this on 2A in the morning meeting. And he said, Trump is not going to be mad at Mike Walls. Mike Walls made a mistake. Trump only cares about disloyalty. And I wonder if the only person I've not heard Trump defend since this happened is JD Vance. And I wonder if this, Vance saying, I mean, the actual quote is, I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. So to me, I love the dovishness. I love the debate. I love the idea of let's always ask 6 million questions before engaging in war. This is an anti-war president. What I did not appreciate was this kind of undermining in the group chat. And then Hegseth's response to him is really interesting. He says, I welcome you bringing this up with the president, with POTUS. And at that point, JD Vance backed off. So that was really what stood out to me. And I haven't seen that discussed a lot.
Yeah, it's a great point. I actually had the same reaction, but I agree it hadn't really been discussed. Adam, what do you think of JD Vance's foreign policy inclinations?
Well, there are a few things that Baccia said there. I agree that Israel and Ukraine they aren't really comparable regarding our support, but I do think Ukraine is just as important as Israel on the global stage. I mean, with the things you laid out, stronger, safer, more prosperous, the U.S. does become all 3 of those things with support of Ukraine. So I do find it weird that JD Vance is pushing Europe away so much. Like in that group chat, it seems like he has genuine disdain for Europe. And that's not the type of isolationism that I like to see. I don't know. This may simplify it, but I feel like we're kind of losing a lot of the lessons that we learned from World War II, like the utility of alliances, having deterrence from Russia and other authoritarian regimes. And now we're withdrawing from the world stage. And this is what seems like JD Vance's opinion of what we should do with Europe, maybe not Israel, but we're withdrawing from the world stage to a degree where I don't know. We just don't seem to be a reliable ally anymore. And it seems
I have. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, sorry. What were we gonna say? It seems like
go.
that's what you guys want, or yeah. What were we gonna say, Mark?
I find myself constantly defending Vance and Trump to some extent on Europe, I really don't think they have disdain for Europe or a desire to push them away. I think they believe that militarily, economically, culturally, socially, diplomatically, that Europe is not only not pulling its own weight, but is endangering itself by not changing in a way that they think is vital to be part of the modern world and a coalition with the United States. So it's tough love, and I know how much many Europeans are offended by it. But if you look at the substance of what they're saying and just the logic of it, they don't want to be at war with Europe. They don't want a weak Europe. They want a strong Europe. But their conception of Europe now is Europe is weak. And I have to tell you, having been here for a couple of weeks, you see it everywhere. Economically, culturally, socially, militarily, diplomatically, they're just not where they need to be. And I think the view of Vance and Trump is, guys, get with the program here, modernize, reform, put your house in order in a way that will allow you to be doing more of defending yourself and being a coalition partner with the United States, where we're not your nuclear and military and economic umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that Europe needs to pay its fair share, but I feel like JD Vance in the group chat, I can't remember his exact wording, I should have it pulled up, but it seemed like they had some genuine hatred for Europe in there. I think they were like, I hate bailing Europe out. I don't want to. So it seems like they want to withdraw us more so than just making Europe pay their fair share. I understand if Europe should pay, first it was like 2%, now 5% of their GDP. European countries need to pay that. I agree with that. But yeah, I just feel like the way they talk to Zelensky, the way, and a lot of Trump supporters, a lot of Trump voters, I want to see what Batya thinks. Batya, do you think we should withdraw from the our alliance with Europe broadly, or do you think it's mutually beneficial?
So I actually think you're right and Mark's wrong. I think you're reading JD's tone correctly. I think it's so funny because this episode really drew out like a bizarrely like the distinction between Vance and Trump makes Trump actually look a lot more mature in his approach to Europe, because Mark, I think you're right about Trump. Like he is bringing this kind of like almost like a coach, you know what I mean? Like this tough love approach. But that those texts, I read them the way Adam did. Like I felt this kind of contempt and a kind of immaturity. And it actually honestly made me rethink myself, because like, yeah, I would have said before, like, I just don't get what we're getting out of this anymore. I think a lot of Americans who don't have a college degree, who don't work in the knowledge industry, feel keenly the contempt of organizations, you know, European organizations, this kind of like globalist agenda that they feel has sort of screwed them over for a really long time, both relying on us economically and so taking advantage of us and sneering at us. And so there is this feeling of like, what are we already getting out of it? But I think like now looking back in hindsight and comparing the way Trump has welcomed these leaders into the Oval Office, the way he has spoken to them with the contempt that JD Vance kind of unleashed in those texts, it is making me have a moment where I'm like, you know, which side of this am I on? And I think the Trump approach actually is correct. And it is sort of much more feeling. And even the way, the difference between how JD and Trump spoke to Zelensky, like it really did. There was like a very different emotional tenor to it. I think we're going to start seeing coming out, like this daylight is opening between them on foreign policy.